Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another installment of Transition Talks with Athlete Soul, where we discuss the stories of transition with former elite athletes and what they have learned throughout the process. I'm your host, Steve Davis Jr., former football player, athlete transition coach with Athlete Soul, and the founder of Strive Higher After Sports. Now, today I get the pleasure of speaking with Shaun Kirkham, an Olympic gold medal rower turned digital operator. Shaun has spent well over a decade competing at the highest level as a rower on the New Zealand team, and he made a unique pivot at the end of his career. So I'm excited to jump right in, so let's go. All right, Shaun, how's it going?
It's going good, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, mate. Morning here in New Zealand. I'm assuming it's the evening for you. So, yeah,
Yeah,
that's all
yeah,
right.
we're making it work. We're making it work. Well, we're here to talk about you, man, and love to hear a little bit more about you and your athletic journey and some of your background and what you did in your sport.
Yeah, cool. I'm happy to share my story. I talk about it a lot, just because it's a really really human story, and as I'm learning, a lot of athletes are going through the same thing. So, hopefully, it's relatable.
Yeah, love it. So tell us a little bit more. What sport did you play? What were some of the highlights of your athletic career?
So I've been basically my whole life has been dominated by being a rower. So ever since I was kind of like a 14-year-old kid at high school here in New Zealand, I was kind of searching for a sport that I could take to an Olympic level. I always had that in my mind that I wanted to be an Olympic athlete in something. Found the sport of rowing. And that has been my vehicle for suffering and achievement and failure. So yeah, I love the sport, but it's one of those ones that's like brutally hard. I was never like a talented kid. I never had natural talent. Like Steve, you mentioned you're a footballer. I didn't have that hand-eye coordination, but what I did have was I was super stubborn and I could just persevere for a really long time. And rowing is just one of those caveman sports that rewards people that kind of persevere. And so that's what I identified when I was a young kid. I was like, oh, if I just throw a whole bunch of effort at this, surely I'm going to get somewhere. And that's the case in that sport. It rewards effort. And so, yeah, I rode for a long, long time. I rode for 15 years, kind of 5 years through 4 or 5 years through high school, and then like a decade in the New Zealand rowing team. A lot of time spent in the New Zealand Olympic team. Went to two Olympics, got sixth in Rio, and then one in Tokyo. So we won the New Zealand men's eight. So that's kind of like the overview of my snapshot, how I came into the sport itself. But yeah, it's been just a huge part of my life for a really really long time, and it still is a huge part of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw a video of you recently kind of talking about, your experience on the rowing team and getting to the Olympics, and there's a lot of trial and error there. Tell me a little bit more about the perseverance that you obtained through the sport and why you continue to push through to get to that level.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of the toughest thing about sports is that, well, it's one of the best things about sports is that it just teaches you resilience and the ability to turn up every day and just give it a good nudge. And I kind of always I pride myself on perseverance and discipline and the stick to it type mentality, and that's kind of what I found in rowing. It's brutal though. It's very cutthroat, like you say, a lot of trial and error, a lot of failure along the way. Like there's heaps of stories out there about people that and really good athletes. And you hear it because it's the publicized stuff around athletes that are just achieving at a really high level. You're hearing about just guys who are continuously successful. And the reality is that's just the 1% of the 1%. So for most athletes, it is a journey of suffering and struggle and failure, trial and error, and having to just turn up, tail between your legs one day and then turn up and attack the session and whatever you're doing. So it's a it's tough, and it does teach you a lot. My experience is, even though I ended up winning Olympic gold, I spent best part of a decade struggling away and kind of getting worse every single year. And so It is a yeah, you learn a lot through that process, but you probably, it's so cliche, you learn way more from your failures than you do from your wins, and the failures are the things that kind of form who you are and how you respond to really hard things that come along in your life. If you've got this background of dealing with failure, you're probably going to handle hard obstacles in your life a hell of a lot better than somebody who's only known success. And yeah, so I think there's lots of cool learnings that come out of it. You have to frame it in a certain way so you survive mentally, especially when you're getting beaten down by bad results. But that's all part of the game. That's what elite sport is, and a lot of people have that same experience as me.
Yeah, that I agree with that 100%. It's like, you go through the ups and downs, and sports kind of teaches you how to push through, and you have this ultimate goal in mind. So you're fighting against the battle of failure, and you're learning from your mistakes, and you're growing. But it seems like sometimes we forget that when it comes to life. So let's talk a little bit about transition. You wrote an article too, talking about your transition and a decision that you made. So I would love to hear a little bit more about when the transition period started to come up and you were at that point of retirement. What was that like, and what were some of the things that you did?
Yeah, it really kind of snuck up on me. It was I've kind of talked about it quite a bit. I spent what was an entire decade trying to get to this pinnacle performance at the Olympics. Like, it took that long. It took 10 years. And then I couldn't imagine life after that point. Like, this was the Tokyo Olympics, and beyond that was just a void. Like, I couldn't imagine what happened next. And I was just so single-minded. And I remember even telling my partner, which was very upsetting to her at the time, that I was so deep in it that I was just like, I would trade years off my life to get a good result here. And so it gives you a really good kind of understanding. And a lot of athletes will be able to sympathize with that it's like, yeah, you'd do anything just to get for your team to perform well, for you to perform well individually, for you to kind of live up to your own kind of ability, and justify the investment in time, energy, and everything and the sacrifices you've made to get there. And so when we got there and we had kind of done the task, we'd won Olympic gold. I didn't have anything beyond that point. I couldn't imagine life beyond that point. And so essentially, you get this massive spike of just like achievement, self-worth. Like, I've bloody done it. We've done it as a team. We've achieved this huge. New Zealand hasn't won that event in 49 years, and so it was massive here in New Zealand, and we kind of knew it. It was like a huge historic moment for us, and it was this culmination of so much work. And then you have this massive high, and then you wake up the next day, that high continues, and then there's a point, a few days after, where you're just like, what do I do now? Like, everyone else is going back to work. I don't know what to do with myself. I am just falling off this cliff. Like, I had no idea. And so I was thinking, oh, do I want to keep on doing the sport? And I was right at my end of my tether by the time I got to that Tokyo race. Like, I had given everything to it, 10 years of my life, and I just couldn't stay in the sport. I needed a break. But the transition part of it was just so hard. It was just so hard to go from being an athlete to just not being. What it felt like is I wasn't anything. I couldn't hang my hat on anything anymore. Like, I'd gone from being the best in the world at this one chosen discipline, in a certain boat class in rowing, to being just like nothing in my eyes. I'm obviously very, self-critical. And so that was brutal. And I remember, like, we had an athlete life advisor at the time. We got some pretty awesome support here in New Zealand, and she was saying that it's going to take you, 2 to 3 years to really adjust to life after you fully retire.
Hmm.
And I kind of fobbed it off. Like, whatever, I'll be fine. I'll be good. Like, I'm tough. I'll work it out. And then, no, as exactly as she described, lady Tina Manker, who was instrumental in helping me kind of transition. But we had this awesome support, and I just had this real drive to find my next thing that I could pour myself into. And so I kind of fumbled around for a while. and then thought, shit, I got a bloody mortgage to pay. I need to make money now. I'm not supported as an athlete anymore.
Right.
Like, holy crap, I need to do something. And I was struggling with employment because I was probably aiming way too high, thinking that I, like, had some value, but really all I had was these skills from rowing, which didn't immediately directly transfer into the workforce. So I was probably aiming too high, and being impatient. And then I was just like, screw it, start my own business. And so I was lucky. I had a skill set, in websites. And so then I was just like, all right, new thing to pour myself into. I'm going to have to pour myself into something. Let it be a business that at least helps me keep the roof above our heads. So that's kind of like this roller coaster that I was on. I felt like I was just plummeting down this hill, trying to work out what the hell do I do next. And the worst point was right after the Olympics and Christmas time. So Olympics was like July, August, and then Christmas time that year, all my family's just like on holiday, enjoying their time. I've had already like a few months off, and everyone's going back to work after Christmas, New Year, and I'm just like starting a new year, 2022, and I just had nothing. And I was like, I have to do something now, otherwise I'm going to spiral so quickly. Like I could see it panning out in front of me that I'm so routine based, and I was like, I need a new glorious purpose. I need a new glorious purpose now, otherwise I'm going to like crumble. And I was very lucky that I stumbled into something, and a lot of people aren't so lucky. And so that's why I think this is a great conversation to have.
Yeah, your journey is similar to a lot of athletes, going through that process and just like, all right, well, I need something that's going to make me feel alive again. And I have these expectations that it was going to happen immediately. But yeah, there is that 2 to 3 year struggle. We
Yeah.
go through that process where we have to rediscover ourselves and try to find like what's our next fire, right? Um, so how did you find, creating a business for one, as part of a challenge, but for two, how did you find your passion in creating a business that you wanted to build?
It's a good question. So how did I find business and specifically, and then the passion for it? Is that what you're
Hmm.
asking? Um, so I was lucky because right, like, as I was kind of ending my career, I felt like I had these little like moments where I'd look forward and think, this day is coming where I fall off the end of this cliff and I don't have something to do. And I had just dipped my toes a little bit into some part-time work. Like, we're fully funded athletes here in New Zealand, so we're professional athletes. We get paid. We get paid to do our sport. It's enough to live on and save a few bucks here and there. It's nothing massive. It's not a very commercial sport, but it's one of the most successful sports, in Olympic history for New Zealand. So we put a bit of funding into it. So we're lucky we can be a full-time athlete, but I kind of recognize that that's a double-edged sword, because when I stop rowing, I need some other skill sets. I'd studied at university and had a degree, but in the last few years of my rowing, I did a little bit of part-time work here for a local company where I live. It was doing kind of website and digital marketing stuff. I had absolutely no interest in websites and digital marketing. I just realized that it was a really good opportunity to learn some real world skills, to be in a work environment outside of rowing, outside of a high performance sport environment, and learn a skill that was actually worth something immediately the moment you stop doing your sport. So that's something that I was kind of really looking for, is something that was immediately valuable the moment I stopped doing sport. And I just kind of fell into this role. I got helped out massively by this local company, CAS. I have so much time for this CAS design, because they gave me a leg up when I really needed it. And they mentioned in that article that you've probably had a flick through already, but they gave me an opportunity to do some part-time work and fit it around all my professional rowing commitments. And so I had this little handhold in an industry which I kind of started to understand a little bit more and started to gain interest in. And so I never was really passionate about it, but I was passionate about entrepreneurship. I was passionate about solving real world problems and finding a way to make that mutually beneficial. So beneficial for people on both sides of it. Like using businesses to solve real world problems, I think is such a cool way to apply. What was a cool way to apply myself. And so I was lucky that I had this background doing this part-time work. And then when I stopped rowing, we were right in the middle of, post-COVID, where a lot of businesses were struggling here. And so ideally I wanted to find employment, but then nobody's hiring because all these businesses are struggling. Like they're just struggling with the macroeconomic environment. And so I thought, all right, my only option now is just to absolutely, go balls deep and start my own business, and put my money where my mouth is, put myself out there, be quite vulnerable about it, and just go for it. And so I had little snippets of kind of experience that had been spread out over a few years. It was pretty it was like fragmented across a few years. So it wasn't that solid footing that I had, but I kind of just backed my own enthusiasm and work ethic, and then just started my own business. Got a few wins, a few runs on the board early, which were really helpful, and just aggressively learned how to be better at what I was doing, and found like passion in what I'm doing based on how much better I was getting. So a lot of athletes will just be motivated by improvement, and I certainly was. Like I wasn't inherently passionate about what I was doing, but I was inherently passionate about being creative, improving, and if I could find a way with my business to help other people, that was a huge win for me and became a huge motivator. So that's
Yeah.
how I kind of found my passion. It's not in the work that I'm doing; it's in the kind of the people that I'm helping now.
Right.
So yeah, it's bloody cool, and I love my business. It's like I can't believe I'm still here doing it, because it was supposed to be a stopgap until I found a real job. But now it's a successful business, and I'm really proud of it, and kind of shocked of the way it's gone. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's really cool journey, and I think that a lot of athletes can kind of do the same thing. We're all pretty similar, like we're all pretty motivated people, and you just need to find a little handhold somewhere and just climb into it. Is my kind of thoughts.
Right. You jump into the next thing that just kind of fuels your fire and you putting all your passion into it. And, we got the grit, the resilience to build forward and, build something that is meaningful. You also mentioned like some different, people along the way that kind of helped. And I know in transition, a lot of us will internalize and try to do the process by ourselves. But you also mentioned some people that were influential. You also mentioned like everybody needs a David. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, no, David will love this. Yeah, I basically, like I say, I'm pretty entrepreneurial. I'm like a little bit cheeky and quite direct. I was just approached a guy named David who was maybe 5 years into starting his own business in a similar industry to me. And he just had this bank of knowledge where he would started his business, run it for a few years, and he had way more background knowledge working at a big agency before that. And so I just approached David, and I was pretty direct and just said, "Hey, do you want to create some more competition for yourself?" And I was like, "It's an interesting way to pitch somebody." And I was like, "Look, if I pay you this sum of money, can you just teach me everything you know?" And I think David kind of just respected the straightforwardness of it, but also probably took a gauge of my character, that I wasn't trying to you know, damage his business. I
Right.
was trying to find a way that we could again, find a mutually beneficial arrangement, and that's what we came up with. And I was really lucky. I had some pretty awesome support through this period. It was like my final years of rowing. We had this scholarship that I had access to, and we were able to make the scholarship work for this type of training. The scholarship's traditionally for like a university degree, but it fits, like all the categories fit with this type of bespoke training. And so we're able to use some funding from a scholarship to give me this insane real world, immediately useful skills that I could glean off just one person directly face to face. So it was massively valuable. I was really thankful for the scholarship, the Prime Minister's scholarship, that allowed me to use those funds in a really creative way that helped me real world. I had an awesome advisor, again, Tina Manka, who helped me, get the pieces in place to get that across the line. And yeah, that scholarship helps out heaps of athletes here in New Zealand, and it certainly helped me. And then obviously David and I, we got along really well. We've become mates, and we're constantly bouncing ideas off each other. He knows he's created competition for himself, but he's also created, I'm a competitive athlete, and he's learned a lot from me as well. So I say I learned heaps from him, but he saw it as an equal opportunity to learn from me, being exposed to a high performance sporting environment for a decade. So it was a really cool relationship that we built, where we're both building our businesses. We're both kind of helping each other out along the way, sharing resources. And yeah, so that was my David that I found, this guy who just like unlocked all this information for me. And it's just a really cool way you can go about it. And it doesn't hurt to try. So if you've got it, like if you're an athlete in any industry and you just idolize somebody, or you just look up to somebody and how effective they are, and they're working in an industry that you really want to work in, you can just ask them, like, hey, can I shadow you? Can you teach me everything you know? What would it cost? Like, how do we come up with a way where it's mutually beneficial, where I learn a bunch, I get a little foot in the door somewhere, and it also benefits you in some way. Like, let's come up with an arrangement. And like David was, crucial in helping me, and so was Tina, who was an advisor helping athletes transition as well. And I've mentioned Karen from Kaz Design, who was where I'd done a little bit of part-time work. Those three people were kind of vital for me, and people I leaned on pretty heavy to help me navigate that process. And I was pretty kind of, you probably get the gauge. Hopefully, I'm pretty open about the things I'm struggling with, and I was pretty open to talking to them and feeling a bit vulnerable about it. And that certainly helped, with, they were buying into the journey that I was on. So it was awesome. I was very lucky. Everyone needs to find their David or their Karen or their Tina.
Yeah. No, that's really cool, man. And those are really perfect examples of leaning into the people, you know what I mean? And working with individuals who are out in the real world. And sometimes, like you said, it's just a matter of asking the question. And the worst you can get is a no, but more than likely, these people are willing to help, you know? And the
Yeah.
fact that you use that as an example to help you transition in your life is a shining light that many of us can also do the same, right? So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. I know now you're, hold your business, you're a speaker, you've been away from rowing for a few years. Like, how is life now, and how have you been able to navigate your identity into like finding your passion and finding things outside of sports?
Yeah, man, it's life is really busy. Like, I it's just ramped up and snowballed. I have a lot of different things on the go, all at one time. I've got lots of different things that are helping shape who I am now. I think immediately after rowing, I kind of wanted, oddly, to really separate myself from the sport, and just, I didn't want to be known just as a rower, just as a Olympic rower, even though that is an amazing thing to be known as. I wanted to, you know, I wanted people to want to work with me because of who I was, not because of my background, which is impossible to separate. I realize that now. But beyond, sport and the business, I've got connections to rowing still that I'm pursuing. I've got a Japanese project, which is actually, super exciting. We're setting up a Japanese exchange, sending athletes over to Japan to row for Toyota. They've got like a corporate rowing team there. So we're helping kind of set that program up, which is, super exciting. Just gives me gives me a way to stay connected to the sport, and to give an opportunity to New Zealand athletes to go over and row for an awesome team and learn about Japanese culture. Beyond that, we're, like, my partner and I are about to have our first baby. So that was something that, yeah, we're thank you. Like, we are. I mean, forgive my plain speaking here. We are in the splash zone, Steve. We are like 2 weeks out. Like, my partner's, her belly's massive, and so yeah, I'm super excited about that. But I'm also happy that we're doing that now. Like, I feel like that's not something, if I had done this, right after retiring from rowing in 2021, 2022, it would have just been, it would have been pretty scary. Where now it feels like I've got probably the foundation to take on a new challenge like that, with a bit more confidence. And so, yeah, there's a lot happening. There's a lot that's kind of defining who I am now. And I'm starting to because my rowing career for the most part was so tough and I had so many failures, like essentially a 7-year slide in performance. Um, I like I said, it took me a while to like I kind of removed myself from that rowing background, and now the further away I'm getting from it, the more I'm starting to realize that I'm very thankful for that struggle I had, because it's taught me all these lessons that I'm now starting to weave into the way that I talk to people, thinking about how I'm going to talk to my son when he arrives. How, like, what do I want him to be like? Like my mom always told me, like she was always aware of how, and she was seeing it firsthand about how hard I was on myself when I was an athlete, and how she was always telling me, Shaun, you need to be kinder to yourself. Like you need to be more forgiving of yourself. You're your own worst critic. And I was thinking, shit, I'm about to have a son, and I need to tell him these exact same things. And yeah, I need to find a way that I set this example for him. And so I can feel my identity shifting around, coming from sport. I'm an entrepreneur businessman. I love that. I love creating new opportunities where they didn't exist before. And now I'm thinking about, how am I going to be a good dad? How am I going to, like, I suppose, take the learnings through sport and what I'm learning in business and international relations between, a Japanese corporate company. How am I going to weave all that into, a middle ground that's just going to be a good example for my son? And so, shit, it's a big task, because you're like, all right, this is why parenting is one of the hardest bloody jobs in the world, because you're just realizing all the things that you've struggled with, and how do you combat that for your kids? And then where are your blind spots? You'll never know, because they're blind spots. So um, yeah, I can feel myself like changing quite quickly as I go through this journey. But it's a really positive one. But it was, initially so hard. But then as time passes, I start to see the value in all that struggle that I had, and all that battle I had with identity after sport, and the ways that it's going to, help improve my life and future, help improve hopefully my son's life, my partner's life, our family's life, and yeah, build us up as a little unit. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question, but yeah, there's a lot going on in my life at the
Yeah.
moment. It's
No, that's some
definitely been
positive stuff, man, and great
yeah,
perspective that looking back and kind of seeing the lessons that you learned and how you want to pay it forward now that you have a son coming in. Like, hey, kids will change your life, and
yeah,
giving them a chance to, grow into the being that they want to be. That's a big
yeah,
task, but they're gonna look up to dad, they're gonna look up to mom, and you get to influence the future. So congrats to you and your partner with that, and definitely continue to push forward the legacy that you're trying to instill within him and moving forward. And as we talk about that too, we talk about future legacies. I want to kind of end us on this question. Athlete Soul really cares about supporting athletes in their transition, and we talked a lot about that in this interview. A lot of that sometimes is like looking back at our own experiences. So if you had the opportunity to pay it forward and talk to athletes that are currently competing, whether in rowing, swimming, basketball, football, whatever sport they may be in, and they're approaching their sport head on, really forcing themselves to just put everything that they have into that, but not thinking outside the box of what life is after sports. What would you say to them? And what would you say to help them speak to more of like the soul of who they are as an athlete?
yeah. It's a really good question, and quite a hard one to answer, because there's no one answer that's going to fit each person. Because on one end, I feel like to achieve really highly in sport, you kind of need to be a little bit obsessed. And with that obsession comes single-mindedness. And I'm all for that. Like I kind of live that. There's this obsession, single-mindedness towards goals. I love that. But playing devil's advocate on that kind of mindset, you do need to think about what's next. You do need to prepare for, you can't do this forever. There's going to be a point where you're going to have to move on. And I think the more you can kind of maintain that single-mindedness towards what you're trying to achieve, while also having that ability to look a little bit further beyond and just know this will end one day. I need to prepare for that in some way. Don't be like me, where you just cannot imagine life after that final event. There's just a void beyond that. Don't be like that. It's a brutal drop off. You need to start thinking about what comes after that. And so I'm a big advocate for athletes where it fits, because you don't want it to compromise your sport, but taking on some part-time work. And that's tricky in some situations. You're going to have to really seek that out and be proactive, and find a good company that you want to potentially work for, or a good side hustle that you can do that doesn't impact your sport. But I would encourage people to explore those opportunities just to get some real world experience outside this sport, because I think I certainly have seen it here in New Zealand, where there's a bit of, and I was the same, naiveness around, you're going to finish your sport and then some opportunity is just going to pop up in front of you and it's going to be all happy days. You're just going to expect to find, like, land on your feet, and it's almost never the case. Like, you just have to work. You have to work for it, just like you do in your sport. And so I would kind of encourage athletes to explore that sooner rather than later, and not let it be this big shock when they decide that they've had enough of their sport or that they've achieved their goal and they want to move on. So
Yeah.
yeah, just keeping one eye on the future there, because you will realize that there is a whole bloody life after sport that is, much bigger than you realize. You do your sport until you're, I don't know, 30s, sometimes 40s for some people, but shit, you're not even halfway. You're not even halfway. Like, you may as well think about what comes next. So yeah, hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully that's helpful. It would be great to see more athletes kind of, thinking about their future before that inevitable end date comes,
Yeah.
basically.
No, that's great advice. And to your point, like, we still have half of our life to live when we get done playing our sport. So preparing for that long term while still playing is not a bad thing. It's actually super beneficial. So you're not having that precipitous drop when you get done. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being in the space, Shaun. It was really great to hear your story, to talk through, your transition and the things that you're currently doing. Congrats once again on the new kid coming soon. And definitely wanted to encourage people to kind of take in what Shaun kind of mentioned today about his story and some of the people that he utilized to help, and just some of those nuggets that can help us in our transition. This is another perfect example of people in the space and athletes that are going through it and figuring out how to navigate and providing some cool nuggets for us to take in as we transition in our own space. So Shaun, thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody, for watching. This is another Transition Talks interview, and be on the lookout for more in the future. So, thank you, Shaun.
Cheers, Steve. Thanks for your time.